Hi, my name is Allison Walsh, and I've been monitoring headlines across several different countries for the past 2 weeks. Now I'd like to share my findings for 15 points in the Investigate the World category. For the past 2 weeks, I've been recording headlines from Pravda, a Russian newspaper, Al Jazeera, a Saudi Arabian newspaper, the BBC, a British newspaper, and the New York Times, which is an American newspaper, and also, near the end of the 2 weeks, about halfway through, I started adding on more papers to get more diverse views, such as the Australian newspaper, Frankfurter Allgemeine, which is a German newspaper, and I also added on the Wall Street Journal, which is just a secondary American newspaper, just for another sort of control. I'd like to address each of the questions provided and then share my cumulative thoughts. First off, do the same events make the headlines in each country or not? Events that take place on global scales seem to make international headlines. For example, Al Jazeera and the BBC often reported on the Syrian war. In fact, Al Jazeera and the BBC shared many of the same headlines and stories, though Al Jazeera would often report more on the Syrian war, which makes sense given their close proximity geographically to Syria. Breaking news also bring out across the world, such as Fidel Castro's death, which every single paper I looked at reported his death as their top story, or the unfortunate recent bombings in Istanbul. A common uniting headline was also the activities of Donald Trump as the U.S. president-elect. If any news about America was mentioned overseas, it was most likely news about Donald Trump. Why or why not do the same events make the headlines in each country or not? Well, all the papers are from different countries, and therefore their own news is prioritized above that of news from a different country, which just makes sense. Country news above international news. News of allies is also prioritized, even in the world section of newspapers. I found that some of the world section of newspapers actually was more about relating the world back to their country, which is understandable. However, it didn't provide as much of a world view as I had hoped. Such is the case with newspapers such as Pravda, which discussed mainly internal Russian issues, as well as the Australian, which, as I'm not up with Australian politics and policies, I had trouble actually relating to the Australian newspaper, as it mentioned the Australian political system, which I'm not familiar with, actually. And let me see. Also, the New York Times surprised me with its lack of international news. It was very good and had very widespread news across America. However, it was more lacking in its world section. What have you learned dominates the news headlines in these past 2 weeks? Well, a mix of things dominates the headlines. It depends on the paper. For example, Al Jazeera discusses updates on the Syrian war pretty often, and the New York Times has a running narrative on the 45th president, Donald Trump. My thoughts, my overall thoughts. I really enjoyed being able to see all the different perspectives the papers had to offer, and I will definitely continue reading some of the more diverse papers, though I don't believe I'll record it so diligently. I think I'll cut down the number of papers, probably read, I'm trying to enhance my German speaking. I'm in German at my high school, and so I'll probably continue reading possibly Frankfurter Allgemeine. I've heard it's a good language learning newspaper, like for people who are trying to learn German. I'll probably keep the BBC because I found that BBC and Al Jazeera have very international news sources, and I'll probably try to do something from every continent. I was lacking in having an Asian newspaper in this experiment, and I'd really like to read more from a newspaper from Asia. I think that'd be more enlightening. The international view I was granted by reading these papers is phenomenal. I would like to offer a few closing remarks upon the profound effect that the connectivity provided by news sources has had on society. Being given the opportunity to be more connected with the world around us is a privilege that is not often taken advantage of. The American schooling system, the only schooling system with which I am familiar, is centered on, you guessed it, America. So students should be educated more on the outside world, and not only be made more culturally aware, but also be encouraged to formulate their own opinions about the world, to reach out and see things and view them recognize that everyone has their own bias. I think that you can really study a culture and learn their bias and see things through their lens. And I think that's very important to do with as many cultures or countries as you can. And I think it'd really help with just foreign relations. And if we can start educating students now on being more culturally aware, we can make a stronger tomorrow. It starts with us. It starts with the students and educating us so that we are equipped with the tools that we need to function in an ever-increasingly connected world. Our world is changing and growing constantly, and being able to reach out and see all these different beautiful things that are happening around the world is incredible, and we should have more opportunity to take advantage, is all I'm saying. I would also like to say a few words on how America is viewed by other countries. As I said earlier, America is represented almost exclusively by its next president, Donald Trump. I am not here to talk politics at all. All I want to say is this. America is a serious player on the global stage. Our representative on that stage for the next 4 years is Donald Trump. Personally, I have not yet found something that I honestly or wholly agree with that he has said, but that isn't what matters. Whether you agree with his policies or not, I think all Americans agree that we hope that he represents America well as a president despite a tumultuous election. As a student, I have a million different media mediums to choose from, and I urge my fellow students to read carefully and to never be afraid to explore the world around them. My name is Allison Walsh, and thank you for your time.